Canada just committed $19 billion to its military future, the largest defense investment in this country's history. But here is the question no one is asking. When those jets fly over the Arctic, over sovereign Canadian territory, and generate classified intelligence data, where does that data actually go? Because right now, the honest answer is not entirely to Canada. Mark Carney just looked that fact in the eye, and he blinked first. Carney, just weeks into his mandate as Prime Minister, slowed the F-35 procurement process. No dramatic announcement, no press conference, just a pause, deliberate, calculated, and to anyone watching closely, unmistakably significant. The reason was not price, it was not performance, it was a single question his government could no longer set aside. What happens to the intelligence those aircraft generate, and who controls it once it leaves Canadian airspace? At that exact moment, Swedish defence company Saab arrived in Ottawa with a direct answer: a sovereign data centre, built on Canadian soil, operated exclusively by Canadian personnel, closed to every foreign government and every foreign system, including allied ones. Carney stayed at the table. That decision transformed a procurement contract into a sovereignty moment, and Canada has not had one of those in a very long time. The facts are not in dispute. What they mean, that is where this gets serious. Canada's program covers 88 fighter jets at an estimated $19 billion. Lockheed Martin was selected as the preferred F-35 bidder in 2023 under the Trudeau government. Deliveries were projected for the late 2020s. The contract looks sealed. Then, Saab brought numbers of its own. The Gripen E, Saab's frontline variant, is in active operational service with Sweden, Brazil, and South Africa. Their Ottawa proposal included a domestic production partnership with Bombardier, up to 10,000 Canadian jobs, and complete aerospace technology transfer. The proposed data centre location, Montreal. Now the critical technical detail. The F-35 operates on a system called ODIN, the Operational Data Integrated Network. Under ODIN, every piece of flight intelligence that those jets produce is routed through American infrastructure. Canada flies the missions, Canada pays for them. But the data those missions generate flows through a system that Canada does not own and cannot fully audit. That is not an alliance arrangement, that is a dependency. And Carney has started calling it by its real name. Nations rarely arrive at inflection points suddenly. They drift toward them, slowly, quietly, until one decision forces the reckoning. Canada joined the F-35 development program in 1997, nearly 30 years ago. Ottawa invested over $500 million into the aircraft before a single Canadian pilot ever flew one. The expectation was always that the purchase would follow, but political controversy, cascading cost overruns, and 5 different governments delayed the final commitment for over 2 decades. The Trudeau government restarted the process in 2022 and selected Lockheed Martin in 2023. It appeared final. It appeared settled. Then the ground shifted. Since 2024, Washington has imposed trade tariffs on Canadian exports. Trump officials publicly challenged Canadian sovereignty over Arctic waters. NATO commitments were questioned openly at the highest levels of American political leadership. The assumptions that had made deep military dependency feel safe, assumptions Canada had held for 80 years, were no longer assumptions anyone could afford to make quietly. What Carney is weighing right now is not a procurement decision, it is a philosophical one, and the consequences reach in 3 directions simultaneously. The first is economic. A Saab Bombardier manufacturing partnership would be among the largest aerospace investments in Canadian history. 10,000 jobs. Domestic production infrastructure, technology that does not leave the country when the contract ends. The second is diplomatic. The moment Ottawa frames military data infrastructure as a sovereignty condition, not a preference, it is sending Washington an unmistakable message. That integration is no longer the default. It must be negotiated. It must be earned. That reframes the entire Canada-US defence relationship. The third is strategic, and it is the one that keeps defence analysts awake. Canada's Arctic airspace is one of the most aggressively contested territories on Earth. Russia is there. China is building toward it. The intelligence generated over that territory is not routine data. It is the map of Canada's future vulnerabilities. Who holds that map matters enormously. But the real story is just beginning. Here is the question that reframes everything. This was never really about which aircraft is superior. Defence analysts broadly agree the F-35 is the more advanced system. Saab has never contested that. The real question is older and more important than any procurement contract. It is the question every serious nation eventually has to answer. At what point does dependency become vulnerability? And at what point does a trusted partner become a structural risk? CARNEY just decided Canada had reached that point. Strip away the contracts, the aircraft specifications, and the diplomatic language, and what remains is a question about power. Modern fighter jets are not weapons in any traditional sense. They are flying intelligence systems. Every patrol over Canadian territory, every radar contact recorded, every signal intercepted, every threat pattern logged produces data that feeds artificial intelligence. That AI builds predictive models. It informs strategic decisions that will not be made for years, possibly decades. Whoever owns that data owns the edge. Now, place that reality in its geographic context. Canada's Arctic is one of the most surveilled and strategically consequential zones on the planet. The intelligence produced over that airspace is not administrative data. It is the front line of the next era of great power competition. CARNEY's mixed fleet calculation is not inefficient. It is architecture. F-35's outward-facing, toward NATO interoperability and high-end allied threat scenarios. Gripen's inward-facing, towards sovereign Arctic patrol and a classified data pipeline no foreign government touches. 2 aircraft, 2 strategic purposes. One protecting Canada's alliances. The other is protecting Canada's freedom to act when those alliances are insufficient. That is not a defence posture. That is a philosophy of nationhood. There is a version of this story where Canada signs the contract, takes the jets, and trusts the alliance.